Welcome to the Beit Din, the Jewish People's Court. Today's session, because of its complexity and importance, is an extended case. The case presents Andy and Laura Stein, who are a happily married couple. However, both of them, we have found, are carriers of the genetic disease, Tay-Sachs. They are parents of one normal child, and Laura is pregnant again. It is, however, too early in the pregnancy to discover whether or not the baby has Tay-Sachs. Concerned about the chances that the baby will have the disease, the couple have sought the advice of a genetic counselor. Laura is generally opposed to abortion, but feels that it would be unfair to bring a known Tay-Sachs baby into the world. She is confused, she is concerned, she speaks for the baby, and she is fearful of the psychological trauma that she and her family would undertake. Andy, however, has substantial problems with the question of abortion and feels that if it was God's will that the baby has Tay-Sachs, then so be it. He also feels that he is speaking for the baby and that his family could deal with the birth of such a child. Still confused and torn between each other's ideas of abortion, the couple have sought expert testimony, as we will see here today, and appear before the Beit Din now, seeking the counsel of the rabbis. Sitting on the Beit Din today are Rabbi Harvey Well, Dayan, Rabbi Mordecai Simon, of Beit Din, and Rabbi Michael Siegel, Dayan. In addition, we will meet various experts who have been brought by Andy and Laura to the courtroom today, to the Beit Din, as we unfold the case of Jewish genetics.
Welcome to the Beit Din, and we have with us today Andy and Laura Stein, who are approaching the Beit Din for direction in assistance in a very perplexing and very sensitive issue affecting their lives. And I'd like to ask Andy Stein, would you present to us the situation?
Rabbis, my wife and I are both carriers of Tay-Sachs disease. And we have one well, healthy child, Barbara, and my wife is now pregnant. And we're faced with a decision about what to do. And I've come to ask you for your opinions and hopefully to save the life of our unborn child.
Laura?
Thank you, rabbis. I feel that we should avail ourselves of the genetic counseling and testing that's now available. And if in fact our child does have Tay-Sachs, we should get an abortion and terminate the pregnancy.
Now, inasmuch as you have introduced a medical specific situation to the Beit Din, of which none of us proclaim an expertise, I do like, however, to call upon an expert, and Dr. Eugene Pergament, who is the director of the Department of Medical Genetics at the Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, to give us some background and information about this particular disease.
My name is Eugene Pergament. I'm a medical geneticist at Michael Reese Hospital Medical Center in Chicago, Illinois. I wish to speak to you about Tay-Sachs disease. Tay-Sachs disease is primarily restricted to Ashkenazi Jews. It's an inherited disease. In this particular disease, both parents carry a gene which place them at risk each and every time they have a child. That risk is 25%. In many cases, the parents don't realize that they are carriers for this gene because there is no family history. However, there is genetic testing available for Tay-Sachs disease. Couples can have blood drawn from their arms and undergo testing which will determine whether or not they are carriers for this gene, Tay-Sachs, and whether or not they are at risk for having a child born with this dreaded disease. About 1 in every 30 Jews of Ashkenazi background is known to be a carrier for this disease. In the beginning, when a child is born with Tay-Sachs, it may not be recognized as being afflicted with this dreaded disorder. At approximately 5 or 6 months into the life of this young child, the parents begin to notice that the child is not gaining in its skills to be able to sit up or to hold objects. Worried, they go to a pediatrician who in many instances will initially reassure them that everything is all right. However, after several months and possibly several examinations, the diagnosis of Tay-Sachs is made. This comes as a thunderbolt to the parents because they are told that their child has Tay-Sachs disease, that their child will shortly die in the next 2 to 3 years from this disease. The parents are told that there is no treatment for this disease, and moreover, that they, as parents, carry a gene which places them at risk for having a second or a third or a fourth affected child with this particular disorder.
We thank Dr. Pergament, and now with that as background, I'd like to introduce, if with the permission of the court, another expert, Seth Marcus, who is a genetic counselor at Lutheran General Hospital in Park Ridge, Illinois. You have met with the Steins, is that correct?
Thank you, Rabbi. The way I got involved in this case is that the Steins did come to me for a very extensive genetic counseling session. At that point, we did discuss Tay-Sachs disease, both the medical implications, as Dr. Pergament has mentioned, as well as the emotional impact. As is very common in this case, there was sort of a conflict about, as we see, about what should be done in terms of Laura's feelings and Andy's feelings. So what I'd like to do now is sort of review with you what happened with that case. Well, I think we've done quite a bit of discussing about a lot of the factual things, like the inheritance of Tay-Sachs and just a lot of the facts. I think maybe now we should talk a little bit more about how the two of you feel, what you want to do from here, and sort of the what-ifs. Have you given that some thought?
What effect does a Tay-Sachs child have on the rest of the family, older children specifically?
Well, in a lot of ways, that's an open-ended question. Certainly, first of all, I don't know how much you recall, but what we talked about before, that when the baby is born, the baby will be medically normal for about 6 months. In other words, appear normal. That's an average. And then there's a progressive deterioration of various abilities of the baby. I would assume that would have an effect on you and the children, the degree to which it's impossible to say. Every person will react to it differently. But certainly the more and more clearly it will have an effect. And obviously we can say that a child with Tay-Sachs does have a significantly shortened lifespan, undoubtedly, or with variation, but these children usually die by about 3, 4, maybe 5 years of age. That's an average. But obviously, someone dying at that age is going to have a significant effect on the family. But how it affects each person is different. I mean, I can't say right now you're going to handle it wonderfully and you won't, or vice versa. I can't say.
So the baby's essentially normal for 6 months.
Right. In other words, the baby is born with Tay-Sachs disease. In other words, it's in the baby's genes. But in terms of how the baby will act, sure, for a period of time, there will be probably a few months where it will seem like a normal, healthy baby.
Will we know as soon as the baby's born?
Well, we can test to confirm the results. We can, as we were discussing before, test during the pregnancy, test prenatally, while the baby's in the womb to see whether or not the baby has Tay-Sachs disease. If the baby does, and we can get into this later, but if the baby does have Tay-Sachs disease, you do have the option of having an abortion. You do have the option of continuing the pregnancy. Whatever you decide is your decision. We're not going to push you one way or the other. We're going to support whatever decision you make. There isn't a right answer or a wrong answer.
What are the risks with
We'll
amnio?
talk to you about it. Well, the amniocentesis, which is done to prenatally diagnose, it does have a risk of miscarriage. That's the main risk of the test. And about inexperienced hands, about 1 in 300 women who have the test do miscarry because of the testing. So it's not risk-free. Certainly that number, the 1 in 300 number, compared to the 1 in 4 number that you're running at this point, because you both are carriers of Tay-Sachs disease, there is that 1 in 4 chance that the baby's going to be affected.
If you're not going to have an abortion, is there any benefit in doing the amnio?
Well, first of all, what I just want to say, what I perceive as a benefit and what the two of you might perceive as a benefit it might be different. People who have had an amniocentesis cite as the benefits of knowing possible the following things. One benefit of knowing during the pregnancy is, one, giving you the option of an abortion. Another benefit of having the test is that you have to remember there's a 75% chance, or 3 and 4 chance, that the baby won't be affected, and that will undoubtedly allow you to breathe easier or relax more during the pregnancy. The other option is, the other possibility is, if we do the testing, and if we do find something's wrong with the baby, you might wish to know that, even if you don't want to end the pregnancy. It might make you feel that you're psychologically more prepared.
Can you ever really be psychologically prepared?
Well, probably not. To some degree. I mean, eventually you will reach a point where you feel like you're making progress, but everyone takes a different stage, everyone takes a different amount of time. Some people would say, I don't feel any advantage to knowing. Some people will say, I'll feel a great advantage to knowing, before the baby's born, I mean. It sounds like you're asking for, like, is there somewhere in a book a rule that will say, if I do this, I'll get over it quicker, if I don't do this, I will get over it. There's no rules. Everyone's going to react to these things differently. And if you perceive it more important, fine. If you don't, that's also fine. In other words, there's no real right or wrong answer. If you think it's advantageous to you to have testing, first of all, it's available to you. If you think when you do get the results, if, let's say, we do find something wrong, at that point, again, you can weigh in your mind what you want to do from there. If you decide to continue the pregnancy, if in hindsight I can say that was a better decision to have known during the pregnancy rather than to wait until the baby's born, I really can't say. That depends on you and how important that is to you to know beforehand. Again, everyone's going to react to that differently. But I think it's important to explore today and when you go home. And one thing I want to emphasize, you don't have to make any decisions today.
But we have this child. We have this child. It's growing in you. And unless we interfere with the natural course of events, this child will be born to us. And I'd like to have some idea of when my child's going to be blind, when my child's going to lose their hearing. And that seems to be an extremely significant question. And it sounds like we'll have at least 6 months with the child.
And then 2.5 years after that of convulsions, blindness, tube feeding. Will there be any response from the child?
Progressively less and less so.
And how long does a child linger with little response, if any?
It could be, again, there's variation. It could be a year, let's say, approximately.
And it needs constant, round-the-clock care.
Yeah.
Which is time taken away from other children that we do have and that we could have.
And that's how it ended. So as you can see, I felt upon leaving the counseling session, they were very informed and very educated about the pros and cons, but as you can see, they're still quite on different ends of the scale as to what to do.
Well, thank you, Mr. Marcus. Now, we want to get down to some of the specifics now of this immediate case.
Mr. and Mrs. Stein, are you happily married?
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Very.
And you have a child. How old's your child now?
6.
6 years old. I see.
Going on 14.
Would you both help the court to understand your feelings on abortion?
I'd be happy to start out.
Please, Mr. Stein.
Even with my first child, I felt from the moment that we knew that Laura was pregnant that we had a child. And I became attached to the child very quickly, and I'm now attached to the child we have here. And I feel that instead of abortion, we would be committing euthanasia. That we have a sick child, and we'll have some time with that child when the child is feeling well. And from what I understand from the experts, we don't know whether the child will spend a great deal of time suffering. And I know that I'll hold that child in my arms, and I know that that child will squeeze back, and that this is a life worth protecting. And I feel very much that I'm here protecting the life of my unborn child.
Mrs. Stein?
I find that I am very moved by my husband's position. Otherwise, I probably might have gone out and gotten an abortion on my own. And I am here so that we can reconcile and reach a decision together. However, I have talked to many people who have been parents of Tay-Sachs babies. And even though I feel God's will does transcend everything, In a book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?, a Reform rabbi stated that God does not control everything and helps us learn to cope with things that happen to us. And part of being able to cope with Tay-Sachs disease, I feel, is that God gave us the ability to screen for it through a blood test. God gave us medical technology that enables us to have genetic screening. And God also has made abortion legal at this point. I don't believe that abortion should be a form of birth control just any time. But in this case, when a child will be born, that who at the age of 6 months could start regressing, who will need tube feeding, suctioning, have convulsions, become blind and deaf, and die possibly before the age of 5. If it were absolutely necessary to have that child, I too would love it. However, I believe God has given us an option, and I'd like to take that option.
Can I get some clarification, please, for a moment? Mrs. Stein, did you have these same feelings when your first child was born?
We did not know at that time that we were carriers of Tay-Sachs.
So this information as far as being carriers of Tay-Sachs came after that?
Yes.
Second of all, is there any reason why you are convinced that this particular child that conceivably soon will be born will be afflicted with this disease?
No, Rabbi, I'm not convinced. There's a 25% chance that a child born to parents who are carriers will have Tay-Sachs. And genetic screening, whether an amniocentesis or a new test that can be done in the first trimester of pregnancy, CVS, I believe, can tell ahead of time whether it is in fact a Tay-Sachs child.
So are you coming to the Based-In to say that should you go through with this testing, which is at this point premature?
No, I could have it done in the amniocentesis can be done in the second trimester of pregnancy.
No, I understand that.
Oh, yes.
But I'm saying that
If I have the test-
the issue, even before that knowledge, before you and your husband have had that knowledge, this issue and the concern of the abortion has already presented itself to both of you.
Well, if we find out that in fact I am carrying a Tay-Sachs child, I would be in favor of aborting it.
Now, I want to point out that you've approached the Beth Din for assistance
Yes, Rabbi.
towards making a decision which obviously the two of you will have to make. But we do have facilities in our community that aid and assist one at least to understand the issue. Dr. Pergament, Mr. Marcus have already indicated a good deal about this, but we have further, let's call it expert, flanking Mr. Stein. To his left is Betty Musburger, a social worker at Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, and she works with families who, in all aspects thereof, who are involved in this situation. And to his right is his brother, and we're going to hear from, I'm going to ask to speak to Mr. Stein first. Do I understand that this is almost a family, besides a husband and wife, a father and mother, this has now become a family involvement? Obviously, you've discussed this because that's why you're here.
We're a very close family, and we feel that whatever would come to them both, who we love, my wife and myself, we would support them. This is a life that's been given to them, and it's one that should be brought into the world and that they should have to struggle with, and that we will help. There is a community, there's our family that will help, and we should just accept this and try and deal with it as a live person. So I've come to help my brother, to be with him at this moment, and to help her as well, my sister-in-law.
Betty Musburger is, I said, a social worker at the Michael Reese Hospital, and you do regularly, probably all too often, deal with families who have this problem before, during, and after. What is your role? How do you direct? Remember, they're also coming to others for help because they're going to make this decision based on a lot of input.
I frequently work with families who are faced with making a difficult decision about how to proceed. And I don't tell a family what decision to make, but I do sit down and give them an opportunity to really discuss all the options that are available to them. I frequently have them call in other members of their family who are influencing that decision, be it grandparents, be it uncles, brothers, sisters, who may be very much involved in making that decision, and kind of give a forum for people to really discuss and really open up their feelings. whatever decision the Steins would make, I would also be available if they determined that they would go ahead and have an abortion. I would work with them through the abortion process. If they determine that they want to continue the pregnancy and have a child, I run a support group for parents of children with Tay-Sachs and other early onset progressive degenerative diseases. So I will stay with the family from the time that they are faced with this decision through the life of their child.
Is there such a group, support group of parents who have been involved with children, Tay-Sachs children?
Yes, there is. We have, at Michael Reese, we have a support group for parents of children with Tay-Sachs and other genetic diseases. And we also have a support group for siblings who, for your daughter, who we think that it impacts on an entire family. And we have a support group for siblings who are facing the death of one of their brothers or sisters.
But one of the factors that we should consider is the impact on the family as a unit. And something that is troubling is the difficulty, difficulty between the two of you. Mrs. Stein, how is this going to impact on your life? And I would like both of you to consider, how is this going to impact on your child's life? And let's talk about this.
That's exactly why I'm here. When Andy talks about the love we have and the family we share, it's because of that that I'm here. I don't want to have to give birth to a child that's going to begin death immediately. I don't want to subject an older sister to a sibling who will die before her eyes. I realize we all must learn to deal with death, but to knowingly subject our older child to such a trauma, I feel is unfair. I've read books on losing a child and what it does to relationships between husbands and wives and to siblings. If it's at all possible to avoid that devastation, I'm hoping we can do so, and then have other children. I know the Torah says we should be fruitful and multiply. I just pray that the children we have will also be able to grow up and be able to do the same.
Will you be able to cope as a mother?
I think Andy is very concerned about my physical well-being. However, I think he's neglecting the emotional and psychological impact that will be my burden to bear, caring for a child, taking care of a child on a daily basis. He's a wonderful father, but he does work. He is out of the home. I am home full-time. And to take care of one normal child and possibly one very sick child, emotionally and psychologically, I feel would be extremely detrimental not only to my health, but to our relationship and to our daughter.
May I ask you a final question? What has been the reaction of parents or mothers in particular who've had children with Tay-Sachs and have gone to this support group?
I think the support group has been tremendously helpful because initially parents usually feel extremely isolated and alone and different.
But these mothers have found strength that they didn't know existed?
Well,
they were able to cope?
That's one of the things that they talk about in the support group, how many people come up to them and say, God must have chosen you because you're so strong and you could handle this. And I've over and over again heard the parents in the parents group say, well, if that's true, make me a little weaker so that God won't choose me the next time. I think that, yes, parents who go through the experience of having a child with Tay-Sachs do grow in some ways. But if you ask them, which I have done on a questionnaire, what they think of that growth, all of them inevitably say, I would choose not to have experienced the growth so early in life if I could have waited and done it a little bit later at a different stage.
I'm going to, a closing statement by Mr. Marcus, and then we'll continue with our deliberations.
I just wanted to interject one thing for clarification. The people who are in a group like Ms. Musburger's group are not people who are confronted with this decision that now confront the Steins and then elected to continue the pregnancy. These are individuals who unknowing that they were carriers, gave birth to a child with Tay-Sachs.
Right. This is a very, very sensitive, a very emotional, a very personal, and at the same time something which has overtones into the general community, and I thank all of you, our experts, who gave of their time and knowledge to share with us, and particularly to the Steins who came and we agitate with you in this decision which is confronting you. We have heard the information, and if you give us a few moments to retire to consider our directions and advice to you in this very, very moving subject. Thank you. Gentlemen, this is a very, very difficult situation, and it's one in which you sympathize with the parties involved. Everyone wants to do the right thing in the right way, and in order to come to that decision of what is the path that we have to take, and in our instance, we're being asked what direction can we give to the Steins to help them in making whatever decision they're going to make.
We do have to go back and we do have to inform them of our decision. And I think as such, what we can do is only present guidelines.
Right.
But-
We can only give advice. This is not a yes or no kind of question that's come before us. These are the guidelines for
And
abortion.
this was what they really came to us for, direction to help them make the decision, which we hope will be done in accordance with, to strengthen the two of them together, that they will now make that decision together in conjunction with their families, themselves, their medical counselor, their doctors, and especially spiritual involvement in the case of their own rabbi or any other rabbi, and spiritual guidance that they will seek. And with
That's
that,
fine.
we understand, hopefully, that they will take that as other additional and hopefully very weighty advice to them.
God
in that
willing,
direction.
they'll never have to make the decision.
We want to thank the Steins for approaching the court, and also the Dr. Pergament, Mr. Marcus, Ms. Musburger, in terms of their assistance which they have rendered to us, as well as to the Steins. The question, as we understand it, to which we will respond, is, of course, the immediate problem of how does Judaism look upon abortion? Is it permissible? And if so, under what circumstances? In Jewish tradition, an abortion is justifiable if a continuation of pregnancy might cause the mother severe physical or psychological harm, or when, in certain instances, the fetus is judged by competent medical opinion as severely defective and would have consequences into the life of the family. What we are therefore counseling, because you have approached this court for help and decision direction in this immediate, very pressing problem in your immediate lives, is that you are aware of this, that you seek counseling, continue the counseling that you have had, but you extend the counseling, and it is to involve the two of you together, other members of your family as well who will be affected by this, but particularly the two of you together, that you approach the medical authorities, involve your spiritual leader, your rabbi, and any other persons that you feel can be of assistance in assessing the many grave legal and moral issues involved in this particular situation. That with that, we hope that you will indeed be given the moral, the physical, the spiritual strength to approach your problem and to solve it to the point of being able together to go forward into, based on whatever decision the two of you have made together.
Thank you, Rabbis.
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbis.
Thank you for being with us in this session of the Beit Din, the Jewish People's Court.